The night air was cool, almost soothing, as it drifted through the open windows of the suburban home where Daniel and Claire Whitmore lived. To the neighbors, their two-story house always looked like the picture of perfection. The Whitmores appeared to be everything one could aspire: two successful careers, a beautiful home, dinner parties where laughter filled the rooms, and smiles that seemed endless. People looked at them and thought, that's love, that's happiness, that's what marriage should be. But like every carefully painted portrait, cracks eventually begin to form. And behind the walls of that pristine home, a storm was brewing, one that no one could have imagined. Daniel was a corporate executive, a man who carried himself with confidence and charm. His tailored suits, his easy smile, and his eloquent words made him instantly likable. He knew how to command attention at a table, how to make people feel seen, how to leave an impression that lingered. Claire, on the other hand, was elegance personified. A woman with striking features, always dressed with care, and with a warmth that seemed genuine. Together, they looked unstoppable, the kind of couple that inspired envy. But perfection is often the perfect disguise. Late at night, when the neighbors' lights were out and the world seemed quiet, the Whitmore home became a battlefield. Arguments erupted from behind closed doors. Accusations, suspicion, jealousy, they tore into each other with words that cut sharper than any blade. And yet, when morning came, they walked out into the world hand in hand, smiling as though nothing had ever been wrong. It was this duality that made their story so haunting. Because to truly understand what happened later, you have to first understand how convincing they were at pretending. One summer evening, a close friend of the couple, Michael, came over for dinner. He had always admired Daniel's sharp wit and Claire's ability to make everyone feel welcome. The night seemed perfect, wine flowed, laughter echoed, and everything looked flawless. But as Michael excused himself to use the restroom, he accidentally overheard a hushed conversation from the kitchen. Claire's voice was low but tense. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" she hissed. Daniel's response was sharper. "Keep your voice down. We don't need him suspecting anything." Michael froze. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but what he heard unsettled him. He returned to the table, trying to mask the unease in his face. The couple quickly resumed their axe smiles, playful banter, inside jokes. It was as though the sharp exchange in the kitchen had never happened. But Michael couldn't shake what he had heard. That night, after he left, Michael drove home with a strange heaviness in his chest. Something about Daniel and Claire seemed wrong. And in time, he would come to realize that his unease wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. An instinct that would later prove chillingly accurate. Because soon, the Whitmore's carefully crafted facade would shatter. And when it did, the world would see the horrifying truth of what can hide behind a picture-perfect marriage. The kind of truth that ends not with happily ever after, but with blood. The following weeks painted a strange picture. To anyone looking in from the outside, Daniel and Claire continued their flawless charade. They hosted brunches, attended charity galas, and smiled for photos as if their love story was something out of a magazine. But if you looked closer than anyone dared to, you could see the faint cracks spreading across the glass surface of their perfect image. Claire had grown distant. Friends noticed she often stared off into the distance during conversations, her smile faltering in moments when she thought no one was watching. She had once been the life of every gathering, but now she seemed distracted, almost trapped inside. Her own thoughts, Daniel, however, seemed sharper than ever. Too sharp. His words, once charming, now carried a subtle bite beneath their surface. At times, he looked at Claire, not with affection, but with something darker, calculated, controlling, as though he was assessing a move in a game only he understood. One afternoon, Michael, the same friend who had overheard their tense exchange, met Claire for coffee. He couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. And now, face to face with her, the unease gnawed at him. "Claire," he said softly, "is everything okay with you and Daniel?" Her eyes flickered with hesitation. For a moment, she seemed on the edge of saying something. But then, as if some invisible leash yanked her back, she forced a smile. "Of course, everything's fine. You know how marriages are. Ups and downs." Michael didn't believe her. The way she avoided his gaze told him more than her words ever could. He wanted to press further, but the tension in her posture made it clear this wasn't a safe conversation to have. Not here, not now. That evening, as Daniel returned home, the couple's argument escalated again. Their voices clashed like thunder in the quiet neighborhood. "You think you can hide things from me?" Daniel snapped, slamming a glass on the counter. "I'm not hiding anything, Daniel. You're paranoid." Claire shot back, her voice shaking but defiant. For a moment, there was silence. Then Daniel leaned in close, his tone chillingly calm. "Remember, Claire, without me, you're nothing. Don't ever forget that." The words cut deeper than any scream. Claire stood frozen, tears filling her eyes. She knew now more than ever that she wasn't living with the man she married. She was living with a stranger. Later that night, she sat alone in their darkened bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Somewhere along the way, the love she once felt had been replaced with fear. And fear, she realized, was slowly suffocating her. The cracks were no longer just faint lines. They were and soon, the beautiful portrait of Daniel and Claire Whitmore would collapse into something far more sinister. The Whitmore house had always been the envy of the neighborhood, a grand estate with white pillars and manicured gardens. But behind its flawless facade, shadows had begun to creep into every corner. At night, the silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of the wind seemed to whisper secrets no one was meant to hear. Claire had taken to sleeping with her phone hidden under her pillow. Daniel had started checking her belongings more frequently, convinced she was keeping something from him. He searched drawers, rifled through her handbag, even unlocked her car when he thought she wasn't watching. And when she asked him why, his answer was always the same: "Because I know you, Claire. I know when you're lying." The gaslighting was relentless. He twisted her words, rewrote their arguments, and forced her to question her own sanity. One night after another shouting match, Claire locked herself in the bathroom, trembling as she stared at the bruises forming on her arm where Daniel had grabbed her. It wasn't the first time, but something about the way he looked at her that evening made her realize it wouldn't be the last. Meanwhile, Michael grew increasingly uneasy. He had begun driving past their house late at night, just to make sure everything seemed normal. But what he saw only unsettled him more. Lights flickering at strange hours, shadows pacing near the windows, and just once, he swore he heard Claire's muffled cries carried faintly through the still night. When he confronted Daniel in public, the man's charm was unbreakable. "Claire's fine," he would insist. clapping Michael on the shoulder with that same hollow smile. "You worry too much." But Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was festering inside that house. Something dangerous. Claire herself had begun to make secret preparations. She started writing down everything Daniel said, every threat, every violent outburst, hiding the notes in a box under loose floorboards in the closet. If something ever happened to her, she wanted the truth to be found. But Daniel wasn't blind. He noticed her distance, her late-night phone calls, her whispered conversations with friends she thought he couldn't hear. And slowly, the mask of control he wore so flawlessly began to slip. One night, as Claire lay awake, she heard him standing in the doorway, watching her in silence. His figure was nothing more than a shadow in the dark, but she felt his eyes on her like knives. "You think you can outsmart me?" he whispered coldly, before turning and leaving the room. Her blood turned to ice. In that moment, she knew Daniel wasn't just trying to control her anymore. He was planning something far more terrifying. The tension inside the Whitmore house was no longer hidden, it spilled into every moment of the day. Claire moved like a ghost, careful with her words, cautious with her steps, terrified that even the smallest mistake would unleash Daniel's wrath. The once elegant home now felt like a prison with silk curtains. Daniel had grown more erratic. His temper snapped like glass, sharp and unpredictable. At times he showered Claire with affection, buying her flowers, whispering apologies. But those moments never lasted. The charm was just a mask, one that slipped more easily with each passing day. His paranoia consumed him. He accused her of things she hadn't done, insisted she was plotting against him. One evening, as Claire prepared dinner, Daniel erupted over nothing, slamming his fist on the table, shattering a glass against the wall. Claire froze, clutching the knife in her hand, her heart pounding. For a moment, she imagined using it not in violence, but in desperate defense. The thought alone terrified her. Michael, meanwhile, had stopped pretending everything was fine. He confronted Claire in a hushed conversation outside a cafe. "You can't stay in that house," he pleaded. "He's dangerous. One day he's going to cross a line, and I don't want to get that phone call." Claire wanted to believe she could escape, but the fear had seeped too deep. She whispered back, her voice trembling, "He'll find me. He always finds me." That night, Daniel discovered her absence and demanded to know where she had been. When she hesitated, his eyes turned cold. He grabbed her wrist so tightly that her fingers went numb. Leaning close, he hissed, "If you ever think about leaving me, I'll make sure you regret it." But Daniel wasn't just threatening anymore. He was watching. Claire found hidden cameras in the living room, in the hallway, even in the study. Every corner of her life was under surveillance. Her skin crawled with the realization that she had no privacy left. The house wasn't just a prison. Now it was a trap. Late one night, while searching for proof of his secrets, Claire stumbled across something chilling in Daniel's desk drawer. Photographs, dozens of them of her, taken when she hadn't even realized he was near. Some from inside the house, others from outside. In the yard, even while she slept. Her hands shook as she flipped through them. These weren't keepsakes. They were trophies of his control. She stuffed the photos back quickly, terrified of being caught. But her heart knew the truth. Daniel wasn't spiraling into paranoia. He was already there, and now he was watching her every second. The walls of the Whitmore estate seemed to close in tighter with each day. Claire no longer slept soundly. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the security cameras made her jolt awake. She wasn't just living with Daniel. She was living under his constant gaze, trapped in a life where privacy no longer existed. Daniel, meanwhile, was unraveling. His charm had all but disappeared, replaced by violent bursts of anger, followed by hollow apologies. He accused Claire of infidelities, of plotting with Michael, even of poisoning his food. His paranoia was no longer whispered, was screamed, loud enough for neighbors to hear, though no one dared to intervene. One stormy night, Daniel's fury reached new heights. He confronted Claire in the living room, rain pounding against the windows as thunder cracked overhead. He accused her of betrayal, his face twisted with rage. Claire tried to reason with him, but logic no longer worked on Daniel. In a terrifying moment, he grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her against the wall. His voice a low growl. "You belong to me. Don't ever forget that." Her body shook, but inside, something snapped. Fear was no longer enough to keep her silent. She realized she was living on borrowed time, that Daniel wouldn't stop until he completely destroyed her, or worse. The next day, Claire reached out to Michael again. This time, her voice trembled, not with doubt, but with determination. "Can't do this anymore," she confessed. "He's going to kill me if I stay." Michael's jaw clenched. He had seen the bruises, the fear in her eyes. He offered her a plan an escape. But Claire knew Daniel's reach. He had money, influence, and eyes everywhere. Running wouldn't be easy. That evening, as Daniel left for a business meeting, Claire searched through his study again. Her hands shook as she rifled through drawers, hoping to find something that could expose him, something that could finally free her. And then she saw a tan, unmarked envelope hidden beneath a stack of financial documents. Inside were photographs, not just of her, but of other women. Strangers, some smiling, some candid, some terrified. Her stomach dropped. These weren't memories, they were patterns. Daniel hadn't just been obsessed with her, he had been obsessed. Before, the realization turned her fear into something darker horror. Daniel wasn't just abusive, he was dangerous, possibly far beyond what she ever imagined. And she knew with certainty that if she didn't get out soon, she might not live to tell anyone. Claire sat frozen, the photographs scattered across Daniel's desk like ghosts of forgotten lives. Each face stared back at her, a silent warning of what might become her fate. The storm still lingered outside, but inside her heart, another storm brewed, one of fear, rage, and desperation. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. When Daniel returned that night, his eyes were sharper, his movements heavier. He had sensed her distance, her growing defiance. He poured himself a drink and stared at her in silence, his expression unreadable. For hours, the house was filled with nothing but the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Claire's every breath felt like it might be her last. Then, without warning, Daniel spoke. "I know what you've been doing," he whispered. His voice was calm, almost chilling. "Do you think I don't see it? Do you think I don't know you've been planning something with him?" Claire's heart nearly stopped. He knew about Michael, or at least, he suspected enough to act. The following evening, Claire made her move. She had already packed a small bag and hidden it beneath the garden shed. Michael was waiting nearby, his car parked a few streets away. She waited for Daniel to leave for another late-night business meeting, her pulse pounding in her ears. But as she reached for the door, she froze. Daniel stood in the hallway. He hadn't left. He had been watching her all along. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his lips curling into a sinister smile. The moment felt endless. Then, instinct took over. Claire bolted. She ran through the back door, the storm of the previous night replaced by a bone-chilling silence. Daniel's footsteps thundered behind her, his voice shouting her name into the darkness. She reached the garden, grabbed the bag, and sprinted. Toward the gate. Daniel caught her arm, yanking her back with terrifying force. "You'll never leave me," he roared. His grip was iron, his eyes wild with obsession. Claire clawed at him, kicking, screaming. Her survival instincts ignited. Just then, headlights cut through the night. Michael's car. He leaped out, charging toward them. In the chaos, Claire wrenched herself free, Daniel stumbling back just enough for Michael to shove him to the ground. "Run!" Michael shouted. Claire didn't hesitate. She ran to the car, tears streaming down her face. Michael scrambled behind the wheel, and with one final glance in the rearview mirror, they sped away into the night, Daniel's furious figure shrinking in the distance. But even as the city lights grew closer, Claire couldn't shake the dread coiled inside her. She was free for now, yet the photographs in Daniel's study, the secrets he carried, told her that he was far from finished. And, somewhere in the shadows, she knew Daniel Whitmore would never stop hunting her.